Screwed that up. Oh well, I guess we have to do it the wrong way, which is the up and down way. First of all, I apologize for my appearance. For those of you who don't know, I'm undergoing some skin cancer chemo treatment, and it's causing all of the skin cancer spots to get burned off, so I look like crap. All right. The case is now in the hands of the jury. We did the closing arguments today, so I kind of want to just go over the closing arguments. They also did the jury charge today. So I didn't really get a lot of feedback about doing the manslaughter versus murder and all that kind of stuff. I probably will one day. Because it's an interesting way. You've got murder, manslaughter, and then negligent homicide. Different levels and what constitutes each. Well, you can generally find that out in the jury charge. So the judge gave the jury charge to the jury. Of course, he's charged with manslaughter. That's recklessly causing the death of an individual. So what does recklessly mean? It means that you're aware of, but you disregard a risk that death will occur. Right? That's what that means. And it's a gross deviation from care. Now, one of the things that in closing arguments that the defense made was, the prosecution wants you to think that this is all about, policy violations. DeCruz isn't charged with policy violations. DeCruz is, and they don't want you to, see the facts. So, they tried to distract you with all of these policy violations that DeCruz made that he didn't follow. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the policies create the standard of care for a police officer. The policies and the laws and the standards and the training that police get create the standard of care. No verdict yet. They just got at 12:03. The jury received the jury instructions and went back to deliberate. So I decided to come out here and grab some lunch real quick. This idea that the defense is trying to say, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. Don't worry about all of these witnesses that testified that DeCruz violated policy or that he did something that they didn't train on, like the blocking maneuver. That's not what he's charged with. He's not charged with a violation of policy. And what the state did, I think, well, is to show that, and when they closed up their statement, made sure that they understood that is the standard of care. The standard of care are those policies. It doesn't matter that it's not against the law or that he wasn't punished because he violated policies. They're trying to say it doesn't matter because policy is not law. And, we hear that in the activist community all the time. Policy is not law. So here's what the prosecutor made a very good, their initial closing statement, 65 seconds. 65 seconds after the stop, Michael Dean was dead. 65 seconds, 1 minute and 5 seconds. My opinion is he's guilty. Now, I'll be upfront that I've always felt that way, but I really feel that way looking at the evidence. There's no other, and I don't think he's guilty of murder. I don't think he ever should have been charged with murder. I don't think this was murder. I definitely think this is manslaughter. And based on all the evidence that was laid out there, it's manslaughter. And as you're going to hear in these closing arguments, and look, I'm going to be a defense attorney. And so I get what the defense attorneys are doing. I understand it. Sometimes it's hard when you're representing a client who's guilty and you've got to make the best case possible, because that's your job as an attorney. Now, it's not to lie. It's not to mislead. But I think the defense attorney here in the closing arguments really made an error in judgment by using the word liar all the time. Essentially telling the jury, if you believe anything the state says, it's because you believe liars. uh, and all of the evidence. These people are all liars, you know. Now, the state didn't do that with the defense witnesses. I think trying to label anything that you disagree with as a defense attorney using a word like liar, I don't think it resonates well with a jury. Unless you can, unless the person is a liar, you know, for example, there's all this evidence that he said one thing and he gets up on the stand and he tries to say the same thing, and then all the evidence points to the exact opposite of what that person said, and he's literally exposed as a liar to the jury. That's one thing. But to essentially say that the prosecutors are liars because, oh, they said this and that never came out. Well, yeah, it did. I mean, I don't know what evidence they were looking at. 65 seconds. 65 seconds. The prosecutor called this an execution for something that he should have been ticketed and arrested for, which was DWI. She says policies are the reasonable standard of care. Yes, they are. They minimize stress. They minimize risk. He knew better. DeCruz knew better what he was doing. Unarmed citizens should go home, not go to a morgue. They made some really powerful statements. Speeding should not be a death sentence. All right. And then it was very, very short. The closing statement was very short, very good. And then Robert McCabe, the defense attorney for Carmen DeCruz, got up and says, I wrote this down because I really wanted to laugh, but I was in court. DeCruz is not some thug on the street. He's just at work. You know, when you run over somebody and refuse to help or remove your vehicle from the person you run over and they're getting burned to death and they're screaming and you don't do anything, that makes you a thug. When you kill somebody over a traffic infraction or whatever, that makes you a thug. He tries to say that Dean was drunk, endangering the public. Well, I agree. That's the case. He was drunk, and he probably was endangering the public, but he didn't deserve a bullet in his head once he was stopped and no longer a danger to the public. That's where things change. When Dean was shot, he was no longer a danger to the public. The keys weren't in the ignition. The vehicle was not running. So Michael Dean was not at fault. Michael Dean escalated the situation by running, the defense attorney says. DeCruz protected the public from felonious flight. No, he didn't. When he pulled him over, he did. And I would even argue when he blocked the vehicle in front of the vehicle, I don't fault him for that. And I don't think that was premeditation for murder. I think DeCruz was probably thinking in his head, because DeCruz didn't testify, and you can't hold that against him. I think DeCruz was thinking in his head, I'm going to put my vehicle in front of this guy so he doesn't go into this intersection and hurt somebody. All right? But the vehicle was off. Once he got out, once he had done that blocking maneuver, and look, I'd probably have done the same thing. But I didn't know. See, I might have done the same thing if it was obvious that he was drunk. At that point, no testimony was given either by Dean himself, even when Dean was interviewed by the Texas Rangers, that he suspected that Dean was intoxicated. Never mentioned that anywhere. That came out later in the toxicology reports, I think. And I think one witness said they smelled alcohol when they went up to the car. One of the officers. So I don't think Dean even knew that he was drunk, but he did know that, DeCruz, but he did know that Dean was evading, and, moving his vehicle in front of the other vehicle to prevent him from evading again might have been bad tactics, but it was a way to keep him out of the intersection, okay? So I don't fault him for that. What I fault him for was the fact that the vehicle's off, the keys are obviously in his hand, DeCruz has possession, not exclusive possession, because, for that brief second, they both had possession of these keys. And they keep using these words like tug of war. There's a tug of war for the keys. That's no different than when, Ermis was saying that we fought over my gun. My hand was on my gun like a half a second. They fought for that key for maybe all of a half a second. There was no tug of war. It might have felt like that in his mind, but that's not what really happened. Then it says Dean struck DeCruz's patrol car. Dean wasn't confused. He was non-compliant. Dean was drunk. If you look at the evidence, Dean was drunk. That's what he was. So on one hand, the defense is trying to say that, DeCruz gave all these orders, and Dean was non-compliant. But yet later, in other words, he was slow, he didn't know what was going on, and he was slow to respond to things. But yet somehow, with incredible reflexes and lightning fast speed, Dean allegedly grabs the gun and within like 2 frames, like fractions of a second, is able to get his hand back. This drunk guy is able to be that fast. DeCruz never placed his finger in the trigger well. Then how did the gun fire? How do you say, when DeCruz himself in the interview says that he fired the gun, the testimony is that he fired the gun. By the way, there was never any testimony from DeCruz to Texas Rangers during the interviews about Michael Dean grabbing a gun until the Texas Rangers suggested it. So if you think the Texas Rangers have our best interests at heart, and they don't, they're not on the side of protecting police officers, we just learned that's the case. Now the theme from the defense is this is all an embarrassment. The state should be embarrassed because it didn't do this, it didn't do that. Look, the state, I think the state went above and beyond in proving its case beyond a doubt. The only people in my mind that are going to not convict are those that just believe that, cops have it rough, we have to cut them some slack and let them kill someone every now and then. They tried to claim defense that Michael Dean's actions caused the discharge, but here's the thing. Even if you agree that Michael Dean's grabbing of the gun is what caused the discharge, the gun should never have been pointed at Michael Dean at this point. And it was negligent for the officer. So even if you believe that, right? Let's just believe that Michael Dean grabbing the gun that was pointed at his head, somehow this 5-foot young man is able to reach all the way over with his left hand while wrestling with his right hand and get shot in the side of the head, not, as he's reaching over and facing that way. It's still criminally negligent homicide because he was still pointing the gun at Michael Dean's head. But for that, if DeCruz had the gun down, once he realized, okay, he's got the keys in his hand, his other hand is up, he's got the keys in his hand, there's obviously no keys in the ignition, so there's no threat, the gun should have been down. Even if Michael Dean had grabbed the gun with DeCruz pointing it in a safe direction, he would not have been shot. Michael Dean is dead because of, or Michael Dean would not be dead but for, that's the legal word, but for the fact that DeCruz was criminally negligently, pointing a gun at Michael Dean's head. So even if you believe that, then you still have to find that he was criminally negligent, and it was a criminally negligent homicide, which is one step down from manslaughter. All right, so that was the defense. I'm sorry. They showed a picture. The defense showed a picture of DeCruz because this argument that he was indexed. The defense is trying to say that he was indexed. The state is saying obviously his finger was in the trigger well. I mean, that's the only way a gun goes off. And as proof that, DeCruz, he was indexing, he didn't have his finger on the trigger. They showed the video of DeCruz walking around the front of his cruiser. And as he's walking around the front of his cruiser, he appears in the blurry video, it appears that he is indexing. In other words, he doesn't have his finger on the trigger, he's got it along the slide. That doesn't account for when the shot was fired. You can't say that when he went off camera and approached Michael Dean's vehicle, and by the way, had he not done the blocking maneuver, he would have had overhead lights to illuminate the vehicle, so we would have been able to see better. Oh, and we would have been able to see the camera, the dash cam footage of DeCruz entering the vehicle. And so the defense wants the jury to believe, well, look, you see this video that happened 60 seconds before the shot? He had his finger off the trigger. It wasn't... so the state's lying to you. Yeah, they called them liars. Ugh. Tried to say that policy is a distraction put out by the state. No, policy is a part of the element of negligence. Okay? The standard of care. A standard of care is due by DeCruz. The state has to prove that that standard of care was breached. To prove that standard of care, you have to talk about policy. You know, we as defense attorneys use policy all the time against the state. We should know that by now. And then, all right, then he said Carmen's a good man. I disagree, especially considering the previous incidents in conjunction with this incident. All right, so the second closing by the state, very good. It's embarrassing. This is, so the state, the defense argument was, you know, their theme was, this has been an embarrassing show by the state. State comes back and says it's embarrassing that DeCruz thinks he can shoot a man over a traffic stop. that was brilliant. It's an embarrassment that DeCruz thinks. It's an embarrassment that the defendant couldn't come up with his own story and had to be fed a story by Texas Rangers. You know, she told a great. You know, this is a great. Analogy that the prosecutor gave, and she talked about the fact that she's got a child who has got really bad allergies, and they're deathly. They could kill him. And so because of her experience and her training in dealing with her child's allergies, you know, she packs her refrigerator in a special way to make sure that things are separated that shouldn't come in contact. When she makes food, she makes them on separate counters because she doesn't want certain foods to come in contact with other foods that the child is going to ingest and therefore trigger the allergies, which could cause death. She takes all of these steps and does all of these things because she knows that if she's in a rush, they get up late, they're in a rush to get the kids to school, and, you know, she doesn't want to make a mistake because a mistake can be fatal to her child. That's the equivalent, she says, of Temple PD training and policies. You have these policies in place so that when you're in a stressful situation, when you've got a last minute issue, and that you can rely on that training, that you can rely on what you know should be in place at the time, so that somebody doesn't end up dead. That's what DeCruz did not do. That's what he did not do. So that was a good. I loved that analogy that she made there. I thought that was a brilliant analogy. She also brought up, and I've already talked about this in a previous video, how all of the peers turned off their body cams to protect Carmen. You know, when they walked up to Carmen, they all turned off their body cameras. There were some cameras that were later in the trial that were sort of close by that accidentally picked up some of his statements. Not all of them, because everybody turned off their body cameras. So you've got, and then not only that, but the fact that none of DeCruz's statements on the scene were memorialized in the report. So you got a bunch of cops in Temple PD that are covering for DeCruz, essentially, by not putting this in there. I brought this up to the city council, by the way. DeCruz's own words. This is a quote. This is DeCruz's own words in the interview with the Texas Rangers. As I'm tensing up to get a good grip on the keys, that's when my gun went off. That's when my gun went off. Then the Ranger feeds this story to DeCruz about, well, now this is very important. Now, are you sure that he didn't grab the gun? That Michael Dean didn't grab the gun? Well, then he asks to talk to his attorney, and there's a 17-minute break. There's a 17-minute break where DeCruz's attorney, and the Texas Ranger are talking about something. And then he comes back and he's like, yeah, I think Michael Dean might have grabbed the gun. Doesn't remember that. But now he's trying to protect his ass. He just killed a man, but he's trying to protect his ass. And then finally, she makes a great point talking about, we're supposed, the defense wants you to believe that while drunk, Michael Dean, this 5'1" petite man, had lightning speed reflexes and stretch Armstrong ability to reach all the way across to the other side of the vehicle and pull DeCruz in and grab his arms. Oh, and by the way, you look at the so in one of the videos where the expert, who by the way had taken one class on video analysis, and now this guy's a genius on figuring out that a shadow is a finger. It was an online training class. Anyway, that he's supposed to be able to reach all the way over there, this 5-foot person. And then within two frames, Michael Dean is back in the chair, back in the seat with his head up. So, so she did make my point about reaching across to the passenger seat and grabbing the gun and how that just doesn't make any sense, but yet the defense wants to make that argument. All right, guys. So the case is now before the jury. If there is a verdict today, it'll probably be, if there's a verdict today, that's probably a sign that he's guilty. The longer this takes, I think the longer, the more it will. I think if we get a verdict today, it's going to be manslaughter. If we don't get a verdict today, it's either innocence or a lesser charge of criminally negligent homicide. As soon as that happens, I'll let you know, and we'll do a part 2 at the end of the day. But for now, take care, be safe, be free. I don't think I have anything here. DeCruz had to believe, okay, yes. Yeah, DeCruz's training probably was that he thought that he could kill and get away with it. How long do I think they'll be out? It just depends on the jury, because it has to be unanimous. You got to get all 12 people on board with one charge. And it's going to depend on the dynamics of each individual person. Is there somebody in there that is just adamant that he's not guilty? Is there somebody in there that's just adamant that he is guilty? I think the way if everybody truly were impartial, I think this would be about a 3 or 4 hour deliberation. If everything was impartial. If the jury believes that the state's case was so good, we could probably have a decision within 2 hours. I think it's going to take 3 to 4 if there's a guilty verdict. If not a guilty verdict, we might go into Thursday. It depends on what the issue is and why the jury isn't unanimous yet. So anywhere between 2 hours and 2 days, if that helps you. That's why I decided to go get lunch, because I knew, my wife packed me lunch. I decided to go somewhere so I could do this video. Anywhere between 2 hours and 2 days. And of course, I'll let you know as soon as that happens. You guys take care, be safe, be free. Don't forget to subscribe, like this post, and hit that notification bell. I don't think people are getting notified anyway, but hit that notification bell, and you'll know when I'm coming back live with a verdict. Take care.